My name is Jeffrey Reed, and I'm a program manager with Microsoft Lync, focused on monitoring and troubleshooting. Troubleshooting a complex server product, like Microsoft Lync, can be a difficult task because there are so many components. If there's an issue, I don't know which server logs I want to collect. And even if I'm able to collect them, I'm often not able to collect logs for a very long period of time because of the number of users that are in my system. Logs can fill up quickly, and if logs don't fill up quickly, then often we have to mine through a bunch of the logs to find specific details for specific calls we're looking for. Or if I'm looking for trends, it's difficult to find the trends in that data when you're looking through a log. So one of the great new features in Lync Server 2010 is this call diagnostic summary report, which enables us to see what's the overall health of our system. What I'm going to do today is generate a health report for our data between April 3rd and April 10th. What we see is we have two sections, which is a peer-to-peer sessions summary section and a conference section. A peer-to-peer call is a call that happens between two users, and a conference is a call which you would join with many more users. And we break these down by their modalities. One of the first features that stands out is this pie chart. What this pie chart is showing me is what does the usage trends look like for my features during that time frame. What we'll notice is in this current deployment, about 3/4 of all of the traffic is for an instant message. Another quarter of the traffic is for our audio calls. And then the remaining items are filtered between a few different items, such as file transfer, application sharing, and video. And these modalities made up all of the conversations that happened between two users in the previous week. The next feature you'll notice is these bars that are standing up. And these bars are indicating the failure rate for each of these modalities. By failure rate, I mean, was the call able to be established or was the call dropped? In this particular report that we're putting together now, we're interested in looking at why is this audio bar so tall. So we're going to click on this and look into why we got a 1.13% failure rate for the week of April 3rd. This report brings us to a peer-to-peer activity diagnostic report. What this shows us is the day-over-day trends for audio calls, specifically what percentage of calls succeeded to establish and what percentage failed. One thing that might stand out are these other terms that are coming across the top of the table. Now these are somewhat cryptic terms, but if we mouse over, we get a nice tooltip. So we see success, if we mouse over, tells us that a call established normally. This means I was able to get into a call and then terminate it in a normal fashion. And so for an end user, everything looked like it happened normally. The next term is a little bit more confusing. It's called an expected failure. When we mouse over it, it comes up with a tooltip, which tells us more about this. An expected failure is something that indicates a call was unable to establish, but the reason it failed was for a normal reason. For example, if a user sets their status as do not disturb, they would expect that calls would be rejected before they even reach them. Or if I'm giving a presentation and someone tries to call me during my presentation, I might try to reject that call. That would be a failure, but based on the user behavior, we expect that to happen. And this is not something we would expect an administrator want to investigate. The last bucket that we want to look at is an unexpected failure. An unexpected failure is catastrophic events that are happening. Your server can't connect to another server. This also happens like maybe I use voicemail with Exchange. If connectivity fails to Exchange, that might be another thing that gets bubbled up in this report. In this report, we break down the failure counts day over day. What this might show us is if one day had a particularly high rate of failures. And if there was, that would give us a clue into why we might have a bad failure rate. There might have been something isolated to one day. We also have this final row, which indicates the total failures across time. In this final row, we have a cumulative count for all of the failures that happened within the week. For the sake of our investigation, let's go ahead and just click this link and see what all failures happened during the week. This brings us to the failure distribution report. The failure distribution report gives us a view of trends over the time and helps us detect patterns in the failures. The first table we have gives the top diagnostic failures. So it gives us an idea of which issues were most problematic during the week. Next, we see a top pools table. This shows us if there was a certain set of servers that were more problematic than others. As we scroll down, we see other tables. Top sources, which server generated the errors the most. Top components, which server components generated the most errors. We also see who the top from users and top 2 users were. Are there certain users that were causing the issues more than everyone else? Finally, we have the top user agents. Top user agents are the servers or clients being used that are causing and reporting the issue. But I'm not really sure what the cause of this problem is yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over and click the link for the 10 503s to understand a little bit more about the trends of this specific information. So now I have a report that's showing me just the trends for the specific diagnostic error that I decided to look up. In the top table, we see a pool that says North America and some Europe pools are both having issues, but none of them really stand out. And when I look at the top sources, I see that there is a specific pool in Europe that's causing more issues. When I look at the top components, I see that mediation server really stands out. And then when I look down, I scroll down even further, I also see that there's trends that seem to be related specifically to the top users that are being referenced. And there's no other real trends of interest. So let's go back to the top and let's just dig into one of these pools and see if anything interesting comes up. This brings us to the failure list report. The failure list report shows us individual calls that we can dig into for more information. One thing that's interesting that we look at in our own investigations is this timestamp here. Sometimes what we find is if we look at the timestamps in this report by scrolling down, what we'll find is that all issues occurred within an hour or 2 hour window, which gives us an idea that maybe there was an outage at that time. I don't really see any of those trends here, so I'm going to click on the session detail link and just investigate a specific call. This brings us to the peer-to-peer session detail report. This is an in-depth look at the call that failed and gives us a lot of useful information. We see the pool that the users were connected to at the time of the failure. We see the specific front end that Kazuki was connected to when this failure occurred. But we also see something interesting here. Kazuki was signed in from outside the enterprise. He was not an internal user. That may be useful data, but we don't really know at this point. Additionally, we have this nice highlighting feature, which shows us something we might want to look at. The 503 is highlighted in yellow. We mouse over and it tells us that the service is unavailable. The diagnostic ID is highlighted in red, and this nice tooltip comes up and gives us a really in-depth detail about what might cause this failure. And one of the things it tells us is we might be able to look at a diagnostic header to find out more information. Let's move down to the diagnostic report section, see if we can find any details in a diagnostic header that will help us troubleshoot this issue. When we click in, we get to a diagnostic report, which contains a lot of really in-depth information. One of the items that stands out is this diagnostic header. This diagnostic header is generated by, in this case, a mediation server, a server component, when it generated a failure or when it received a failure. This diagnostic header would be sent back through the servers and actually would land in a client log, but we actually show it to you right in a nice UI that's friendly to look at. One of the interesting details that's provided by the mediation server in this case is a gateway FQDN. This gateway FQDN is the PSTN gateway which the mediation server is talking to. Now we know that the mediation server is merely relaying a failure back from the PSTN gateway, and we know specifically which gateway is generating that error. This particular failure was generated by a legacy OCS 2007 R2 server. If the mediation server was a Lync 2010 server, we might also have additional information here. One of the useful parameters that often gets added in this case is a cause code that's provided by the PSTN gateway. We could use this cause code to look up in our PSTN documentation why this external gateway that Lync is interoperating with generated this failure. So Lync goes beyond troubleshooting our own system to help us actually troubleshoot issues with the PSTN network as well. We also have these additional diagnostic details which are provided to us in provisional responses when we set up the call. One of the interesting things that comes out here is a phone route. Without looking up the user, or without looking up the phone number, we're able to see right in this UI which phone route was being used to direct this call to the mediation server. This actually saves an admin some troubleshooting time where they would normally have to go look up a user and look up a policy. I hope now you're able to see some of the power of what we can do with these diagnostic troubleshooting reports and how we can use these to take a very difficult, widespread issue that's affecting your entire system and bottom it out to a single issue. For additional information on the reporting capabilities in Lync Server 2010, please check out TechNet and search for Monitoring Server report content.